lecture is about understanding culture and cultural diversity in Bangladesh. I am Rigan Chakma, senior lecturer, ULEP. So first of all, why actually we are going to discuss about this lecture. This lecture is about basic understanding of culture and introducing Bangladeshi culture, its heritage, and why it is important. It will give an holistic understanding about the Bangladeshi culture and the current status of indigenous people and cultural diversity and heritage of Bangladesh. And my target audience is general people who may have biased perception about cultural diversity and who have basic ideas about cultural heritage of Bangladesh. The learning outcome is it will develop a sensible mind and pluralistic mindset and a good citizen of Bangladesh. To understand this lecture, I have developed an overview. So, under this overview, first of all I am going to discuss about ancient Bangladesh and the definition of culture and elements of culture, understanding culture and what is race, ethnicity, minority under sociological perspective, then again culture of Bangladesh, then again indigenous people and their culture and their status, their historical contribution, and finally the role of Bangladesh to preserve cultural diversity. In this picture, we see that the house of King Pandu. So, this house of King Pandu is why important. This house of King Pandu is important because this is the earliest archaeological evidence in ancient society has been discovered, and this is situated right now in south bank of river Ajoya in the district of Bardhaman in West Bengal, India. And why this is important? It actually giving us evidence about the ancient Bengal and their societies, their cultural system. And in ancient Bengal is called Bangla from the medieval period. So, previously there was no name such as Bangla. Later period of time we will explore what is Bangla and how it's evolved. Another issue is the pre-Aryan society. Before the Aryan came this area, if we see the picture, in this picture the Indo-Aryan migration happened, and before Indo-Aryan migration the community is mainly the tribal community and turned into monarchy later period of time. And about this Aryan concept, Aryan theory, there are debates. I am not going to discuss about the debate. Right now, before Bangla, what is the name of this area? This area known as Janapadas, the 6 Janapadas. One is Pundra, the part of northern Bangladesh and northern parts of West Bengal, and Gaurav, parts of mid West Bengal, Rar, southern parts of present West Bengal, Bongo, the major parts of present day Bangladesh, Somotot, Kumilla and Noakhali area, and lastly Horikel, the Chittagong area. So, in this picture you see that the ancient Bengal, how it consists. Right now come up with the Bengali culture, because in Bangladesh the majority of people they are Bengali. And how this Bengali culture emerged? Bengali is related with the culture of the Bengali speaking people. So, this Bengali speaking people theoretically dated back earlier than when the Bengal came to known as single administrative unit before Bangla emerged full-fledged its language. So, origin of Bengali culture is related to origin of Bengali language. But how this Bengal, the idea of Bangla is emerged during the period of 1350s under the ruling of Shamsuddin Ilyas Shah. That period of time this area known as Bengal, Suba Bengal, Shahi Bangalia, and that way is name is Bengal. And later period of time we see that according to archaeological evidence, the Bangla language developed proper Bangla more than and last around at the same time. Therefore, it is related with the political change, and therefore Bengali culture came it is said that approximately to be 800 years or at best 1000 years old, but it was primarily based on culture of the religion which was thousands years old. So we can say that the Bengali culture right now is 1000 years old. But in terms of their other food habit and other cultural events, we see that rice, which is still a staple food for the Bengalis and which was cultivated at least 3000 years before the advent of the Aryans in this region, and it continues to be cultivated later even when the Bengal was swept by the host of invaders including Aryans, Turks, Arabs, Afghans, Mughals and Europeans. So lots of invaders came this area, but the rice culture is stable over a period of time. And the religion, the culture is related with the religion. According to the 2001 census, almost 90% of the population is Muslim, and just more than 9% are Hindu, 0.7% are Buddhist, 0.3% are Christian, and Aminists and others are 0.1%. So the majority is the Muslim. And Bengal belong to the outside edge of major religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism and Islam, and no religion reach in this zone its original form. From archaeological evidence, we found that Huansang, the 17th century Chinese traveler, recorded how various religions and communities in Bengal shared doctrines, ritis and rituals belong to each other, and how the Buddhism are practiced in Bengal had drifted significantly away from the original. That means that the all major religions like the Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism and Islam, okay, the original form is not reached here. Another one is language. Language, a member, the Bangla language is a member of Indo-European family, and Bangla was originally not the language of the area which later took the name of Bengal. And what we found that the Eastern Prakrit by the Aryans and it form of Pali by the Buddhists, which through phonological, morphological evolution for centuries took the shape of a separate language with its own grammatical features and vocabulary. Traces of this early language can be found in Chorjapoda from the 19th or maybe 10th century. So this is the picture about the Chorjapoda and some information. Another interesting thing about the cultural diversity is the folk culture, and this folk culture is very important for Bangladesh. And this under this folk culture we see that folk song, folk ballads, folk plays, alponas, pottery painting, wall painting, jatras, dancing and acting, jari sharis, all under the folk culture. And despite the present trends of urbanism, globalization and the underlying culture in both urban and rural communities is folk oriented. The settlement and ethnicity. The settlement of the Bengal is mainly through villages. During the Sultani regime, the population increased and the village also flourished. For security and production, people possibly lived in the community settlement is called Purs and Nagars, okay, that is found in Chorjapodas. And such a settlement pattern must have significantly contributed to rise and culture suitable for semi-urban settlements in feudal bias. Anthropologically, most Bengalis belong to ethnic groups called Austro-Asiatic, but there is also a Dravidian presence. Apart from those two groups, Bengalis have a large segment of people of Tibeto-Chinese and Semitic origins. So, in this previous discussion, we discussed about the ancient Bengals and the origin of culture. Right now, the present understanding of culture in sociological perspectives. So, what do you understand about the culture? To conceptualization culture, we look at the the sociological definition of culture. According to Ralph Linton, okay, the culture of a society is the way of life of its members, the collection in orders and habits which they learn, share, transmit for generation to generation. So, culture determines how members of the society think and feel, the outlook of life, the accepted behavior, and this culture varies societies to societies. The elements of culture. The elements of culture is mainly two elements of culture. One is material culture, another one is non-material culture. Material culture, what we can see. Okay. For example, the buildings, the hairstyle, clothing, jewelries, those all under the material culture. Another one is non-material culture. For example, customs, beliefs, philosophy, government patterns, okay, under the non-material culture. To understand this culture, some elements are quite important. For example, language. We all know the language is one of the major elements of the culture, and then the values. Based on the values, we develop the standard, what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong, what is beautiful and what is ugly. And another one is norms. Norms is established standard behavior, okay, maintained by the society is norms, and the sanction, okay, and sanction either expression and approval given to people for following norms or expression of disapproval for violating them. For example, to rearing a child, okay, when the child is doing good things, we give him or her reward. When a child doing bad things, we punish him or scold, tell him or her not to do it. It's related with the positive sanction and negative sanction. Another one is folkways. The society strictly not enforce it, but according to the society, the folkways is bad. For example, a person is throwing rubbish here and there. According to society, this is not acceptable, but that is not strictly enforced. And another one is mores. What is society strictly enforced? For example, stealing or killing something, killing someone, okay, some person, that is under the mores. Another one is taboo. A taboo refers to a norm so strongly ingredient that even the thought of its violation is greeted with involution. Taboo, for example, eating human flesh. So, when you think about the eating human flesh, okay, even you cannot think of it. Okay, it socially is totally some kind of, even within the thinking process, it is kind of violating the social norms and standards. That is under taboo. Right now, to understand the culture around the world and our surroundings, some terms are quite important. For example, cultural shock. So, what is cultural shock? So, a person, okay, going to the new places is totally different from his or her culture. For example, if a person visits, okay, as remote area of Sahara Desert, okay, and he or she might got a cultural shock, okay, because this is totally different from his or her culture. Another one is related with the cultural shock, that is ethnocentrism. So, ethnocentrism is use its own culture as a yardstick for judging the ways of other individuals or societies, generally leading to a negative evaluation of their values, norms and behaviors. So, I am showing a picture, okay, so under this picture you can easily understand what is ethnocentrism based on their own culture, how they are judging other culture. Another term is cultural universals. So, this cultural universalism is referred to the some values, norms and some thing we in every society actually we are doing. For example, cooking, childbirth, funerals and so on. So, almost every culture have those kind of things. Another one is cultural leveling. Cultural leveling is the process to which cultures become similar to one another and refer to especially to the process by which Western culture is being exported and diffusion into their notion. For example, for cultural leveling, for the traditional Bengali culture, how you want to see the traditional Bengali culture, or indigenous culture, how we want to see an indigenous culture, that is under the cultural leveling. Another one is cultural diffusion. Cultural diffusion is the spread of cultural treaties from one group to another, including both material and non-material treaties. Okay. The cultural diffusion, for example, this is a picture, we can see that the Amazonian tribe groups, okay, went for hunting, and right now in this picture we easily trace that. So what is the difference? What is the problem within the picture? Okay, that is cultural diffusion. Another one is dominant ideology. Dominant ideology is, though it is part of culture, but it's mostly related with the social, economic and political interests. Mainly the Antonio Gramsci, George Lucas, Karl Marx use this term to understand the interest of ruling class. The race, ethnicity and minority, this is important to understand the cultural diversity of Bangladesh and around the world. So race is socially defined category based on real or perceived biological difference between groups and people. But right now the race, the idea of race is no longer is there, because this race is also the socially constructed. The ethnicity is socially defined category based on common language, religion, nationality, history or another cultural factor, that is under ethnicity. A minority group is made of members of a social group that is significantly denied the same access to power and resources available to the dominant groups of a society, but who are not necessarily fewer in a number than the dominating group. This race, ethnicity, minority is quite important to understand the cultural diversity of Bangladesh. So in this picture we see that indigenous and tribal people of Bangladesh. So Bangladesh has lots of indigenous people, more than 54 indigenous people according to the indigenous leaders of Bangladesh, but according to government he is saying that more than 45 indigenous group. So what we find here, according to Kaping Foundation, the report is saying that in northern regions, Santal, Oraus, Mahali, Munda and a lot of other indigenous group, they are living in the northern region. In southern region we see the Mahato, Munda, Bagdi, Bhumiz, they are living in the southern region of Bangladesh. And greater Mymensingh areas we see the Garo, Hajong, Bormon and other indigenous group are living in the greater Mymensingh area. In greater Sylhet area, Khashi, Manipuri, Khashi, Manipuri, Skols, they are living in that area. And in coastal regions, the Rakhine, Tonchonge are living in the coastal region, and in Chittagong Hill Tracts, Chakma, Marma, Tripura and other lots of indigenous peoples are living in the Chittagong region. That means that all over the Bangladesh, the indigenous people are living all over the Bangladesh. So here is the picture, you see the jhum cultivation. The woman is doing the jhum cultivation and the jhum field. Through this picture we see that the jhum cultivation. So jhum cultivation is going on all over the Chittagong Hill Tracts. That is, the jhum cultivation is mainly in the hilly areas. The people doing the slash and burn, okay, and through that slash and burn process they are doing the cultivation in the hilly areas. Right now the indigenous roots of Bangladesh. So it is quite important to understand the indigenous roots of Bangladesh and the current status of indigenous people in Bangladesh. We see that Bangladesh is a country of cultural and ethnic diversity. Over 54 indigenous people speaking at least 35 languages, along with the majority Bengali population. According to the census in 2011, we found that 1.8% of total populations are indigenous people, and majority of indigenous people live in the plain districts, and rest of the indigenous people living in the Chittagong Hill Tracts, and the state does not recognize indigenous people as indigenous. Nevertheless, since the 15th Amendment of the Constitution adopted in 2011, people with distinct ethnic identities beyond the Bengali population are now mentioned, yet only cultural aspects are mentioned, whereas major issues related to indigenous people, economic and political rights, not least their land rights, remain ignored. The CST Accord in 1997 was a constructive agreement between indigenous people and the government of Bangladesh, intended to resolve key issues and points of contention. It set up a special administrative system in the region. 23 years on, the major issues of the accord, including making the CST Land Commission functional and a devolution of power and function of the CST's institution, preserving tribal area characteristics of the CST region, demilitarization and the rehabilitation of internally displaced people, which is remain unsettled. Right now, come up with a debate with the indigenous, hillman, aboriginal, tribal Adivasis under the Bangladeshi law and practice. The issue of the identity of indigenous people of Bangladesh has led much debate and controversy, and on occasion has brought indigenous leaders and government officials into sharp disagreement. The aboriginal groups in the Chittagong hill tracts are generally known as Pahari, meaning hill people, or as Jumma, related with the shifting cultivation or Jum cultivation. The plain aboriginals, particularly those in the northwestern greater Rajshahi region, used to be generally known as Adivasis, meaning aboriginal or indigenous. This term had little currency parts of the Bangladesh until 1990s. However, ever since 1992, when the International Year of Indigenous People was declared by the United Nations, more and more indigenous peoples, both from CST and the plains, including the Greater Mymensingh and the Sylhet and Borishal divisions, have started to increasingly refer to themselves as indigenous in English and as Adivasis in Bengali language. Right now, indigenous people's contribution in Bangla language. Bangla as a lingua franca for indigenous people. So, within the indigenous people, they use Bangla for communicating within the other groups of the indigenous people. We found that Munda, Santali, Khashi, Garo, Orao, Manipuri languages are very well organized and orderly and testifying to a developed past. Munda, Santali and Khol languages are even more ancient than the Aryan language in India. Not all Bangla words have come from the Aryan language. Most in fact have originated from Munda. Munda has also had considerable influence in Bangla idioms, phenomenology, morphology, philology and syntax. The tribal languages belong to either Austroasian, Indo-Chinese, Chinese-Tibetan, Tibetan-Burman or Dravidian families. As admixture of these languages created a pidgin language in ancient Banglo-Mogothe which had Munda at its center. This established the initial foundation of Bangla of East Indic family of language. The tribal language thus contributed immensely in the formation of Bangla language. So, here is a picture about the Mongol Shobhajatra. Here is a picture of current Bengali culture. There is a picture of indigenous people of Bangladesh, their culture and diversity. There is another picture about their culture and diversity, lifestyle. Right now, come to the point, historical contribution of indigenous people of Bangladesh. So far, according to the historical findings, we found that the Chakma resistance against the British East India Company from 1772 to 1798 under the leadership of Runu Khan. Later period of time, Chakma kings are settled this dispute with the East India Company. We also found that the Santal Rebellion in 1855 to 56 against the British. The revolt was spreaded by two brothers, Sidhu and Kano Murmu, along with their sister Polou and Jano Murmu. However, British historians and many national historians perceive that the movement as the harbinger of Indian National Congress movement for independence. Next point is how Bangladesh government is taking initiative to preserve cultural diversity. So Bangladesh has a national cultural policy in 2006, and the main objectives of the cultural policy is to protect and promote cultural expression in Bangladesh regardless of caste, class, religion and origin, etc. Second one is to develop cultural activities and integration with economic development. Third one is to protect, preserve and develop cultural elements of small ethnic groups. Fourth one is, and of course, to meet the wave of globalization and conceive positive elements and resist negative effects. So therefore, for the people of Chittagong Hill Tracts area where majority of small ethnic groups lives, Ministry of Chittagong Hill Tracts Affairs including local government agencies, NGOs work for the development of life and culture in the region. Next one is the role of Bangladesh in the international arena. To preserving the cultural diversity, Bangladesh has ratified the UNESCO Convention 2005 on the protection and promotion of the diversity of cultural expression in 2007. Bangladesh is a unique example of multicultural country where along with 98% Bengali population were at least 45 small ethnic groups who possess different culture like own language, food habit, dress, music, etc. In the Constitution of People's Republic of Bangladesh, it is clarified that the state will safeguard the right of practice and development of all cultural trends of all people in its territory regardless of caste, religion, origin, color and gender, etc. Bangladesh government has taken remarkable initiatives to implement the agenda of the convention within the outside of the territory. Legal frameworks have been developed. Bangla Academy Ordinance in 1978, Bangladesh Shilpokala Academy Act 1989, International Mother Language Institution Act 2010, Small Ethnic Groups Cultural Organization Act 2010, and even in the National Education Policy 2010, National Women Policy 2011, the promotion of protection of diversity of cultural expression in Bangladesh have been ensured. And finally, the cultural heritage. The cultural heritage, we see that the current Bangladesh has 4 intangible cultural heritage on UNESCO list. The first one is Baul song in 2008 and traditional Jamdani weaving in 2013, Mongol Shobha Jatra 2016 and Shitol Pati weaving in Sylhet 2017. And in 2018 onwards, the rickshaw and rickshaw paintings in processing to being included in the list of intangible cultural heritage of humanity of UNESCO. So finally, in the lecture, if we sum up the lecture, we see that we have discussed about the ancient Bangladesh, how its origin and its cultural heritage, then the Bengali culture and its relation. Then we discussed about the culture, its elements and its formation on the understanding of sociological perspective. Then we discussed about the indigenous people around the Bangladesh, their diversity, their cultures, their contribution, historical contribution, and finally how government is taking initiative to preserve this cultural diversity of Bangladesh. And that's all for my lecture. Thank you, all of you.